Welcome to another segment of the Naval War College Foundation's Collection Spotlight. Today we're talking about the U.S. Constellation's anchor that we have on display next to the museum. Now this anchor is in desperate need of some conservation. Let's talk about the different parts of the anchor, and then I'll explain what the issues are and why it needs all of this conservation. So the main parts of an anchor are the arms at the bottom, the flukes, which are these giant triangular pieces you see here, the shank, which goes up the center and through this piece here to the other side where it has a ring that attaches to a chain, and then we have the stock, which is our main issue today. The stock on this anchor is not original. The wood rots out regularly, so the stock has to be replaced every 20 to 40 years. That would mean that with the age of this anchor, it's probably been replaced between 4 and 9 times since it was created.
This anchor has features dating it to being as old as 1829. A 1797 anchor would have been welded together at the point of the arms in the center. The experts at Mystic Seaport have verified that this anchor is a solid arm piece across the entire bottom, which overlaps in the wrought iron to attach to the stock. This created a stronger anchor that would not break in the center and was longer lasting. Another difference from 1797 style of anchors, which have examples on display at the Constitution Museum in Boston, is the ring attached to the anchor chain. An older anchor would have a solid ring through the stock, whereas this ring is interrupted near the stock with a pin attaching it through the stock to the rest of the anchor. This style of ring with a pinned attachment is seen as early as 1829 on the Perrin's improved anchor. The thought was that this system was less likely to fail catastrophically than the solid ring. It could also be repaired and replaced more easily than a solid ring. Due to the strains on an anchor during use and the earlier manufacturing practices, anchors were not meant to be long-lasting pieces. If you needed to get away from danger quickly, you would cut anchor and leave it behind to get another anchor later. They broke and they needed replacements. As anchors improved, you would have wanted the stronger anchors that were less likely to break and cost you more money in the long run because you would need replacements instead of repairs. With all that in mind, the original anchors that were first put on the Constellation in 1797, before it sailed out, were definitely not the same anchors that were on the Constellation when it was decommissioned and scrapped in 1853. And while it has been disproven that much of the original frigate was reused and made for the U.S. Constellation sloop, it is possible that the frigate had some fairly newer anchors on it and that the sloop used those anchors. Or it could be possible that the frigate anchors were scrapped and a different set were put onto the sloop. All we know is that this anchor is old enough to have been on the USS Constellation frigate, and this anchor is one of the 2 anchors that came off of the USS Constellation sloop in 1904 and was put onto our dock in front of where the ship was tied up.
This is one of 3 anchors left that came off of the USS Constellation sloop in 1906. We have one here, 2 more are down in Baltimore with the Constellation Museum. So, several things that are going on with this anchor. We actually have some metal rot happening. So we have some rust you can see inside the chains. We have areas where new paint has been applied because previous paint and metal has been flecking off, and previous people just thought that they would need to paint over it and then everything would be fine. That's not true. We actually have some pretty bad delamination happening between the fluke and the arm. There's a rivet holding the arm to the fluke here for this particular style of anchor, and between the areas where that is pressed together, there is significant delamination, which is going to cause a huge problem because this entire fluke could come off, jeopardizing the entire anchor, unfortunately. So our next biggest issue, besides all of the areas of delamination that we have here, the separation and flaking off of more metal in various places around the anchor, is the junction point between the shank and the stock. We're in an open outdoor setting here, so the elements are not treating this anchor very well. The top of the anchor has a lot of wood rot happening to it. There's no cap on the top of it currently, so water can just get in and start sliding down the whole anchor. This is not a crack. This is actually two separate pieces of wood that are pressed together around the shank of the anchor, and they're held together by dowels. There's two, you'll see four, that you'll see one there, one at about this section, one at about this section, and one lower to the bottom. But there's only two metal bands holding this stock together. Originally, this stock was 15 foot 8 inches. It's currently only 12 foot. And that was, when that was made that way, because it was constructed in Boston at the Constitution Museum, and it had to get under overpasses in order to get here. It would have been very costly for them to come down and create the stock on the anchor here, which is how you would have had to do it to have the full length of the stock. So what we have is a shorter than usual stock for this size of anchor. And then we have these two pieces of wood that are pressed together, and the water has rolled down and is actively rotting away the wood as it meets with the metal here. So I shouldn't be able to just pull away and have dust fragments come from my fingers here. So this is very dangerous. This is also destroying this plate here. This plate is actually supposed to be inset into the stock, and when they remade it, they put it on the outside of it. We have period sketches of when anchors like this were created that this is actually supposed to be inset, so water just runs down the whole thing. It doesn't stop when it hits here and cause all of this damage that you see here. So originally, this stock would have had between 4 and 6 metal bands holding the wood together. The dowels push, let's say, horizontally from left to right in the 4 places where it holds it together, but the bands would hold all the way around, compressing everything together so that as the anchor was used, it wouldn't want to pull apart in any one particular direction. So we only have 2 very thin narrow bands being used on this stock right now, and you can see that the upper band has broken on one corner and is actively splitting the wood in that area because it's no longer supporting it. The dowel at the top up there is also being pulled because the band is no longer supporting the wood in that area. The wood is swelling past where it's supposed to, and the dowel is twisting and probably broken on the inside, again from rot. So this is very dangerous. We've actually talked to an anchor expert at the Mystic Seaport Museum, and he has informed us that we have less than a year to fix this wooden anchor before it just collapses on us. So it's very important that we have this taken care of, because if this were to collapse, it would destroy the metal, it would destroy our patio, it could hurt somebody. It's very important for us to take care of the objects in our museum. And this one has come, the stock has come to the end of its life, and it needs to be replaced. This gives us a wonderful opportunity to make this stock as it would have originally been done and put the money into seeing the original piece back on it. So what we're going to do is we're contacting the Mystic Seaport Museum, and they're going to come in, disassemble this stock here, transport this anchor and the stock onto a crane. Well, use a crane to transport this anchor and stock onto a flatbed truck, take it to Mystic Seaport. They have a metal expert from Maine that's going to come in and, as best as he can, save what we have left of this anchor. If there's rotten pieces that are falling off of it, they can't stay on. So if he has to take off some of the metal in order to preserve the rest of it, then that's what has to happen. And it's going to be repainted with a paint that's ideal for this outdoor setting where this anchor is. The sunlight that's glaring on it, the salt water that's coming up from the ocean right behind us. This particular paint is not doing well. I can actively pull pieces off of it where there's rust underneath it. So we're going to use the most high quality paint we can for this particular purpose. The chain is also going to be looked at. We have a lot of links that are starting to rust pretty badly. And then when we get this back, the metal will be in the most pristine condition it can possibly be, and we'll have a stock on this anchor that is as original as we can figure it to be. We have patents and we have drawings of anchor stocks for this type of anchor and what they would have looked like. So we can actually have this created to the original size that it was, the 15 foot 8 inches that it originally was, in the shape that it's supposed to be, because this is a little bit square. This is a little bit stocky for what this anchor would have been actually looking like, and we don't want to misrepresent what this anchor would have looked like. We know that this anchor was 15 foot 8 inches tall because before it was changed in 1988, we had measurements taken and they're put in the file. So we actually know that the actual size that this anchor stock was, which is very exciting because we don't have to guess at whatever size it was. Another thing that was added to this anchor at some point in history are these metal hooks underneath the anchor. They're at intersections of maybe 18 inches apart, and they're small. I can fit one finger through them. I don't know if they were put on to help drag the anchor. At one point in 1906, when it was taken off the US Constellation sloop, it was actually displayed in front of the ship. The ship was harbored in our port between 1890 and just after World War II in 1945. So at that point, it was dragged from where it was down at the port by a team of 16 horses up to Quarters A, which is our CNO's house on the other side of the museum currently. So I don't know if maybe those were added at that time so that they could drag it with those horses. If it was added more recently, it's definitely not original. So we'd like these hooks, these bands, to come off because there's no reason for them to be there. We can safely and easily have a crane lift this anchor whenever we need it to be moved. So there's no team of 16 horses that needs to be around, and there's no need for these hooks. So this anchor is pretty heavy. It's estimated to weigh about 6,000 pounds. One of the other anchors that came off the US Constellation is actually stamped with its weight, and it says that it weighs 8,000 pounds. On a ship the size of the Constellation, you would have had 4 large anchors, and they would not all be the same size. The largest anchor would be at the 4 starboard location on the ship. You would have 2 anchors pretty near the front of the boat, on either side, and then a little bit further back you would have 2 more, and that's just to help with keeping the ship from turning in a direction you don't want it to turn while you're in harbor. Not all of the anchors would be the same size because you mostly used the 4 starboard anchor, so that would be the largest anchor that you would need, the heaviest anchor. And so this might not be that anchor, the anchor that was at the 4 starboard of the ship. It might be one of the other ones that is smaller. So having the other anchors that came off of the US Constellation say that they're a larger weight than we estimate this to be is accurate to the way that anchors were at that time in the collections that they were as they went onto ships. We're actually very excited to weigh this when the crane does pick it up to see how much it actually weighs, because 6,000 pounds is an estimate. Again, the last time it was moved, it was dragged by a team of 16 horses. And it might have been moved by an anchor after that, but we don't have documentation of them trying to see how much it weighs. So we're going on the guess that this is a 6,000 pound estimate. We're very excited to see how much it actually weighs, because if it weighs 8,000 pounds, then it weighs the same as one of the other anchors. This is a lot of fun math we get to figure out. Maybe one of these anchors was the 4 starboard anchor. Maybe it wasn't. But that's some fun conjecture that we can get into later. So the next step in the conservation of this anchor, now that we have the approval to have the money allocated for this stock to be repaired, now that we've found Mystic Seaport agreeing to do the conservation on the anchor, the next step is for Mystic Seaport to come up here. They're going to take this stock and the anchor flat on the flatbed truck, and they're going to take it down to Mystic Seaport. They're going to construct a new stock for this anchor, at the same time that they have a metal expert coming in to do metal work on it and take care of the rest of the anchor that we have left here. We hope to do filming during the whole process so that you can see how the wood is kilned, how the metal is prepared, and all the other conservation efforts that go into the cost of this anchor and the restoration of it. Thank you for joining us on another segment of the Naval War College Foundation Collection Spotlight.
This thing weighs 11,000 pounds. These things are
Is that what he got on the scale?